My whole work is about dignity and pride and displaying us in this fashion rather than exotifying us or making us look like nothing important when actually we're very important.
Yes.
Meet Tanya Peterson. She's a South African artist who focuses on identity and decolonization. Her early work discusses her Muslim faith and her Indonesian heritage.
The Cape Malay people are the descendants of the people who were brought here from Indonesia, but it's a little bit more complex than that. The very small part of us is really authentically Indonesian. We are very mixed now, so it's kind of a Creole community.
In the 1600s, the Dutch brought people to the Cape of Southern Africa from present-day Indonesia, which was Dutch-controlled. Initially, those brought over were mercenaries to help the Dutch subjugate the Khoisan peoples who were indigenous to southern Africa. As time went on, the Dutch also brought political prisoners and people who were slaves. Added to the mix were people from Eastern Africa, Madagascar, and the Indian subcontinent who were also enslaved. Many who came from Indonesia were Muslims, and they spread Islam throughout the Cape. Tuan Guru, a direct ancestor of Tanya's, was an exiled Indonesian prince who was instrumental in establishing a strong Muslim community in the Cape. In Islam, slaves found community, identity, and safety outside of brutal Dutch control. Though today the term Cape Malay connotes someone of Indonesian descent, its history is fluid, and at various times it either referred to people from Indonesia, enslaved people, or Muslims.
What happened with the Cape Malays is they decided they don't want to be called Cape Malay anymore. It's not true to who they are. And then they prefer to be called Cape Muslims because that is what they identify themselves as a Muslim community. And then it also is more inclusive because the Cape Malays are not just Indonesian or Malays anymore. It is people from all over. A lot of our existence within this country has sort of survived because of the ritual and the ceremony that is attached to our religion. What I try to do is try and stress the social, political importance and impact that we have had on the landscape of South Africa. I mean, there's everything in Cape Town's halal.
That's true.
We're clearly here.
Yeah.
So our presence is felt. Our presence is felt. The problem is whether or not it's taken seriously.
The contribution Tanya's people made to South Africa is often ignored. Their slave labor was instrumental in building the early wealth of the Cape Colony. They also heavily influenced the religion, customs, food, and language of not only the Cape, but present-day South Africa.
Afrikaans, which is sort of the Afrikaans language of today, which people think is Dutch or belonged to Dutch descendants, was actually a Creole language. But it was then taken and adopted by the church and then fed back to us as if it was not our language. Yeah.
We know that the people of the Cape came from all over and spoke many languages. Because of this, they had to find a way to communicate with each other and with the Dutch colonizers. After time, a Creole Dutch was formed. This language had a Dutch base, but used words, syntax, and grammatical structures from the many mother tongues of those who used it. This Creole language was widespread and became the lingua franca of the region at the time, though it was sometimes called Kitchen Dutch and considered lowly because of the people who spoke it, i.e. enslaved people, free people of color, and poor white Dutch people. During the same time, Islam was becoming increasingly popular, and schools were created to teach people the religion. These early imams who came from Indonesia and could read and write Arabic because of their knowledge of the Quran began using Arabic script to write religious texts in this Dutch Creole for their students. Arabic Afrikaans wasn't limited to religious texts, though, as there are some existing letters which show that people used it for non-religious communication too. Eventually, the colonizers adopted it, and because they couldn't adhere to strict racial purity and have such a mixed tongue, stripped it of the most obvious influences of the Khoisan and Asian languages, wrote it in Roman script, and dubbed it Standard Afrikaans. They started using it in newspapers and official government documents, and began considering the language legitimate in its own right. Over time, it became associated with the South African racist white nationalists who dubbed themselves Afrikaners. The Soweto uprising of the 1970s, during which hundreds of school children were killed and thousands wounded, were triggered by the Afrikaans Medium Decree of 1974, which tried to force black schools to switch from their own languages of instruction to Afrikaans. However, it's important to know that Afrikaans is still largely spoken by colored people in South Africa, and local dialects of Afrikaans maintain some words that trace their origin back to indigenous and Asian roots.
What would you tell an outsider coming into South Africa?
Go back home. No, I'm joking. But you get a lot of people that come here and they wanting to help, and it's patronizing. They don't come and try and help us because we don't need anybody's help. Actually, I think you can learn from us. Because to be completely honest, I think that South Africa is actually at the forefront of progress as far as racial integration, or as far as dealing with things goes. Because we are not scared to talk, and we are not scared to feel uncomfortable, and we are not scared to make each other feel uncomfortable.